Welcome back. All right, so we're going to talk about the LA Kings today. I've seen people saying, "What about my team? Where's the video on my team?" I'm only doing one of these a day. Started with Toronto. Felt like that one needed to be done with and out of the way first, and I'm working my way through, and I'm trying to do Western, Eastern, Western, Eastern. So today, it's the LA Kings. The LA Kings had a storyline this year that feels eerily familiar, although it was a shorter storyline, and that was the knockout in the first round at the hands of the Edmonton Oilers. So it started in 2021 2022. The LA Kings back in the playoffs for the first time after missing 3 years in a row. They finished 44, 27, and 11, 99 points, and really strong point totals. One thing with the LA Kings to keep in mind is 2012 and 2014, years this team won the Stanley Cup. They weren't great during the regular season, so the LA Kings have shown regular season for them doesn't necessarily mean a lot. But in that first round, they lost in 7 games against the Oilers. Hard fought, really, really contentious series, and they had the rematch the following year. 2022 2023, the Kings finished 47, 25, and 10, 104 points, so an improvement of 5 points. And they go out in the first round again against the Oilers, this time in 6 games. So going into this season, I felt like, the Kings could be kind of a sleeping giant. This could be a really good team this year. And at points in time, they were, especially early in the season when they were undefeated on the road and all of that. And they set records. But they finished the season with the exact same record they had 2 years previous 44, 27, and 11 for 99 points, which has to be considered a disappointment because now the team's not showing that upward momentum. They're just kind of in that mushy middle. And then they lose in the first round against Edmonton, this time in 5 games. And while they were able to score in the first couple of games, they struggled mightily to score against the Oilers in the final 3, including being shut out at home 1-0 in game 4. And so for the LA Kings, the question then becomes, okay, you've got a good team. Rob Blake's built a playoff team, but has he built a contender? And right now the answer would be no. So Kempe was their leading scorer this year, 28 goals, 47 assists for 75 points in 77 games. Kevin Fiala, number 2 on the list, 29 goals, 44 assists, 73 points in 82 games. Then there's Anze Kopitar, 26 goals, 44 assists, 70 points in 81 games for Kopitar. Now, for players 22 years of age and younger, there are some players on this roster, as would be expected, because they did go through that retool of a few years there. Byfield, 80 games, I should say, 20 goals, 35 assists, 55 points. Quinton Byfield had quite the breakthrough season. However, his production really stalled down the stretch, and he was unable to get a goal in the playoffs. So for Byfield, a player who is up and his contract's due, I will be curious to see what they do and how much money he's worth and for how long. Do you give him a bridge deal thinking he might get better? Do you give him an 8-year deal and pay him what you think he's going to be worth? That's the question that Rob Blake has yet to answer. Then you got Jordan Spence, 71 games, 2 goals, 22 assists, 24 points. I got some heat in the preseason for saying when I did the preview for the Kings that I felt like Spence was going to be the next guy, and I was told, no, it's Brandt Clark. But I didn't think Brandt Clark was this far along in his development, and Clark played 16 games, 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. Brandt Clark absolutely is the next guy on that blue line. We'll see where he slots in. Laferriere, on the other hand, 81 games, 12 goals, 11 assists, 23 points, and never takes a night off. He's a player who gives you the hardest work that you might want. His work ethic's fantastic. And I think the offense will actually get better. I think the 12 goals, I think that'll be a low watermark. I think he'll beat that next year. I could see him being a consistent 20-goal scorer. Kaliev, on the other hand, has kind of trended in the other direction. Highly thought of prospect. It just hasn't worked right now. 51 games, 7 goals, 8 assists, 15 points. Might Rob Blake decide to dangle out one of the younger players and see what he might be able to attract in a trade? We'll see. But Kaliev, a player who had his struggles this year. And then you got Turcotte. Speaking of struggles, and he's had a lot of injuries, 20 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points for Turcotte. Hasn't quite become the player that was expected when they drafted him as highly as they did. But again, because of injuries, I'm not going to put that on Rob Blake. Injuries happen. And then there's the goaltending, which is a fascinating question because going into the playoffs, they had really good goaltending. Talbot, 27, 20, and 6 with a 913 save percentage. Riddick, 13, 6, and 3 with a 921 save percentage. But in the playoffs, it all falls apart. 861 save percentage for Talbot, 872 save percentage for Riddick. Now, it is the Edmonton Oilers. They are known to light up goaltenders. So I don't know how much you can put on Talbot or Riddick, especially when their team wasn't scoring anymore. But they definitely don't have a Jonathan Quick right now. They don't have a goaltender who is that game-stealing goaltender that Quick was for so long. Maybe it's Portillo. Maybe he gets that shot next season. But we'll see what they do with their goaltending, because they absolutely have what they need in terms of these guys both being on expiring contracts. They have the room to bring in another goaltender should they decide to. What's interesting too, and basically researching this video, the last time this team got out of the first round was 2014 when they won the Stanley Cup. So I guess you could say it's feast or famine for them when it comes to playoffs. They're out in the first round, or hey, Stanley Cup. So trying to get back to being what they were in 2014 is not going to be easy, especially since Kopitar's older. He's 36, and Doughty's 34, and at some point in time you do see that production drop off. Kopitar's still one of the best two-way forwards in the game. The fact that he's so responsible defensively means he can probably play as long as he wants to, can probably play into his 40s, but the production will and usually does drop for players in their late 30s. So I wanted to highlight a few trades because Rob Blake's under the gun, and I think there are a few moves here that are worth talking about. He's made some good moves too, though, and I want to say that. I just didn't want to fill the entire board up with trades. But June 27th of last year, this is the trade that everybody talks about, right? Where Gabe Vilardi, Alex Iafallo, Rasmus Kupari, and a 2024 number 37 pick is traded to Winnipeg in exchange for P.L. Dubois. It has been a failure. Dubois' contract does not look good. The Kings have already said they're not planning on buying him out. They're not going to buy him out. But it doesn't look good. He's not in their top three scorers. He's obviously not 22 years of age or younger. And he did not produce the way that they would have wanted him to. There's no way that Blake makes that deal if he had known then what he knows now. I don't think he trades for Dubois. I think Dubois ends up maybe in Montreal, and Montreal would be saddled with that contract. Because I think he would have got that contract from another team during last offseason. He had good numbers in Winnipeg. Just this year in LA, absolute disaster. Then June 29th of 2022, so a year prior to that, he trades Brock Faber's signing rights to the Minnesota Wild, along with a first-round pick in 2022, which became Liam Ogren, in exchange for Kevin Fiala. Fiala's a very good player. He is. He's an excellent player, one of their top three guys. But Faber's signing rights and a first-round pick that's become Ogren, who may very well be a regular for the Wild next year. It just shows that the feeling was, okay, we're done with the rebuild process. We don't need more of these young kids and prospects, which I get. But again, we're going to look back at this trade and say 4 or 5 years. If Faber keeps playing the way he did in his rookie year, we're going to say, wow, that was a bit of a mistake. October 7th of 2020, they traded a 2020 second-round pick, which became Will Cooley, in exchange for Elias Anderson. So Will Cooley, that draft pick, traded to the New York Rangers. Will Cooley's been a good bottom six forward who's got a little bit of potential to be better than that. And what's interesting, too, is that draft pick that was traded for Elias Anderson, that's one of the 2 draft picks they got in the trade for Alec Martinez going to the Vegas Golden Knights. And of course, Martinez, a huge part of how Vegas wins that Stanley Cup last year. He's a shot blocking machine, and it just doesn't feel like the LA Kings got back full value for what they could have with Martinez from Vegas. But they're not the first team that's had a trade with Vegas that hasn't worked out for them. So they're pending UFAs. Arvidsson, who was very productive when in the lineup, but that's kind of the key thing, when in the lineup. He wasn't in the lineup that often. Lewis, older player, bottom six guy. If they want to bring him back, they probably will. They probably can. He's not going to cost a lot of money. Roy is going to cost a pretty penny. Matt Roy is an excellent defenseman, and I think he's going to be pricey. And so the cap space they have is going to get eaten into quickly. Talbot, Riddick, as I previously mentioned, both goaltenders on expiring contracts, and Phoenix Copley, who was injured during this season as well, he's expiring too. So that opens the door for Portillo, who is a restricted free agent. So he probably gets a 2-year deal, I would think, and maybe gets a chance to be the backup. But to who? Do you keep Talbot? Do you keep Riddick? Or do you look for somebody else on the market? Do you maybe call down the street to Anaheim and say, hey, how much for John Gibson? At which point Anaheim might hang up. I don't know that they'd want to trade him to LA, but just saying. And so, yeah, we'll see what they do with their goaltending. But other pending restricted free agents, you've got Lizotte. I like Lizotte as a third-line option. Grundstrom's been good at times. Byfield, as mentioned, absolute beast for the first half of the season. Did tail off in the second half of the season. Kaliev, previously mentioned, has had some issues this year. Spence, really good top 4 defenseman. I would think he's going to get paid. Turcotte, Thomas, Portillo. Thomas had a good run at the end of the season there when he got called up. I would think a 2-year show-me contract for him as well. The cap space they have as of July the 1st is $20.9 million. One of the reasons why the Dubois buyout is out there isn't just that he didn't produce all that well. It's that when you look at the players they have to sign and the amount of cap space they have, which again includes the increase of the salary cap for next year, that almost $21 million is going to get eaten up pretty quick with Byfield, Roy, just those two in general. I would think combined has to be $10 million, right? Maybe. And again, it's dependent on, do you sign Byfield to a 2-year deal? Do you sign him to a 7 or 8-year deal? Because again, he's going to be pricey. He's going to be pricey if you sign him to a long-term deal. And if you sign him to a bridge contract rather than a long-term deal, you're playing with fire that 2 years from now he's not going to be worth a lot more. I think Byfield's 55 points. I think next year it should be 65, 70, and he should continue to climb. Not all players come into the NHL and produce right away. It's just generally not how that works. So this year's draft, if you're a Kings fan, you can watch the first round they're drafting, but they don't have a draft pick in the 2nd, 3rd, or 5th round. So if you decide to skip day 2 of the draft, probably going to be just fine. But the LA Kings have been trading draft picks with their eyes on the current product, and then the question becomes, so is the current product good enough to win a Stanley Cup? And if the answer is no, should they still be moving draft picks and future assets in order to try to improve things right now? I do think they will. I think they'll still see themselves as being in the hunt and saying, you know what, we can still do this, we can make this work. But it is right to take a look at this team and say, so is it built to win in the playoffs, and have that debate. And that debate lands at Rob Blake's doorstep. And Rob Blake takes full responsibility for this and anything that I've seen. And yeah, since 2017, Rob Blake's been the general manager. Jim Hiller was the interim coach to end the season. And his plan was simple. Just cut down on any chances against, and just go out there and play that really defensive style of hockey, which worked pretty well to get them into the playoffs, get them into a top 3 spot in the division. It kept the goals against down, but in the playoffs, they ran into a team in the Oilers that just outplayed them and was able to break through that defensive coverage the LA Kings had. So I don't know if you keep Hiller. I don't know if you keep that system either. I think this is a team that's plenty talented and can win high-scoring, fast games with that back and forth style of hockey. Along the same lines as like a Carolina or New York Rangers. I think they can play that style of hockey, keeping in mind that both Carolina and the New York Rangers, who are against each other tonight, of course, both of them are also defensively capable and sound. So I think for the Kings, it's about adding some tempo to their game next year and keep that defensive structure there. But just a little bit more speed, and then just maybe take the reins off the offensive guys just a little bit. Just give them that little bit more freedom. I think you'll see more scoring. And the goals against, while they would probably come up under that scenario, maybe they don't go up that much. But the question mark becomes, what does Rob Blake do with the coaching position, and how does he solve the goaltending that just wasn't good enough to get them past the Oilers in that first round? And it's definitely questionable, too, when a team goes out in the first round 3 years in a row. It is against the same team, so it may just be a bad matchup. Maybe if LA plays against Dallas, maybe they pull off a huge win instead, but we'll never know. So we'll see what happens next season. But I guess the question I have is simple. Are the LA Kings going to build themselves to be a contender? Do you have faith in Rob Blake to be able to do that for next season? Do you think, you know what, yeah, the Oilers are just a bad matchup. If they play somebody else, they have a good chance. Like if they played the Canucks, would I have been surprised if they beaten the Canucks? Not really. They had a style of hockey that really frustrated Vancouver. Just it didn't frustrate Edmonton the same way. And the Oilers having that familiarity from playing them the previous 2 years, I think helped them too. So are the LA Kings just, 1 or 2 moves away and maybe playing against the right playoff opponent away from moving on and being a better playoff team? Or what you see is what you get and they need to make a change? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And again, if I haven't talked about your team yet in one of these videos, I will. I absolutely will. By the time the playoffs are done, I will have done videos on all 31 teams that did not win the Stanley Cup. And then I do the video on the team that did win the Stanley Cup and talk about how it happened. So thank you guys so much for all your support as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.